Okay, well, here we are, everybody. I'm very excited to be here today with Deb Alma from the Poetry Pharmacy, previously the Poetry Ambulance. And Deb's going to share a little bit more about herself and this incredible journey that she's been on to create the Poetry Pharmacy, where Maria and I spent an amazing morning. I don't think I've ever spent almost 5 hours in a bookstore before. And as many people know, I spend a lot of my time in bookstores. So Deb, I know you're super busy. I know the BBC have interviewed you. I know you've been on Kelly Clarkson show. And so I feel very humbled that you were willing to chat with me today. And I'm looking forward to having a bit more of an understanding about you and how you put all this together. So,
Hi, Jules. It's a great pleasure to see you again. Actually, it was really lovely to meet you in the shop because I live just behind the shop, in the same building. So yeah, it's really nice to have a chance to chat to you again. So thank you for inviting me.
yeah, of course. And yeah, we were so blessed to see you when we came. I think so, like I said before we started recording, there are so many things that I could talk to you about. But I had a very unusual experience when I was in the store. And when I found the Poetry Pharmacy online, I could have easily ordered, all kinds of a plethora of juicy stuff online. But I felt even from the pictures online, I needed to be in the store. And I knew when I got inside the store why. And there was this sort of almost an alchemy of being around books. Now I'm used to the alchemy of being around books. I've
Mm.
never been in a store though where the books are cultivated around the ailment of human and how you've got the poems, and then you've got these sections of love and calm and inspiration and joy, and all the books in those particular categories function to support whatever that ailment is. So that was extraordinary. I mean, there are millions of things that were extraordinary, but I think one of the things I really want to focus on today is the how of this. The how, like I know you have a master's in creative writing, so you're obviously a writer and a poet, but right, okay, millions of questions. Um, let's start with a practical question. When you were driving around the festivals in England in the ambulance, the poetry ambulance, and you were giving away your bottles of pills and stuff to people and doing readings of poetry for people with their ailments, I'm assuming they would sit with you and tell you what the ailments were, but you can tell us a bit more about that process of how you do your consultancies. At any point then, were you working and did you have an income during that time? And B, were you just going around the festivals like a service project?
Right. Lots of questions in there already. I had a sensible job. I was a low income single parent when I started doing emergency poets, what I called it. And so I dress up as a doctor and in my vintage ambulance with nurse verse with me. And I had a poetry pharmacy of pills underneath an awning. And I had a sensible job which paid the bills or sort of paid the bills. It was very low income, but I was a teaching assistant in primary school. I was also working to do I did it in my 40s. I was working to do my MA in creative writing as well as setting up this. I think there's something about women, maybe this is maybe a bit sexist, but with kids, you kind of feverishly energetic. I needed something for my mind as well as paying the bills and looking after the kids and doing the cooking and shopping. So I set up Emergency Poet, and it was a crazy idea. I bought a vintage ambulance for next to nothing on my credit card. I couldn't afford it, and I volunteered at a local poetry festival and did 2 days of doing poetry on prescription from the back of the ambulance. And it worked really, it just worked. It worked really well. And then I was invited to another two arts festivals, music festival, and then another four. And it was so visual as well. It got lots of media attention quite early on. And so I ended up being able to make my living as a professional emergency poet. So I never just showed up somewhere. I was always invited and usually paid for by the festival, which was often Arts Council funded or ticket funded. So yeah, and I did other kind of less apparently frivolous work as well. I did some work working with people with dementia using poetry to assist communication. I did some work in hospice care and people with sight loss using poetry again. So they kind of informed each other.
Yeah.
And then I think the last question, the poems in pills, I gave away under the awning because not if people didn't have time for a full consultation and lying on the stretcher in the back, we could give, they could sort of self-medicate from the bottles of pills, and nurse verse under the awning. So that's that's kind of a quick summary.
So how did you know so many poems?
I I'm a poet myself. I was doing creative writing. I worked before I had children a long time ago because I'm so old. I used to work for a publisher, so I'm a reader. Worked for a publisher, was a writer, and when I was thinking of doing the project, I had great pleasure in putting together a kind of anthology of poems that I might recommend for. So I had to sit there in the evenings. I couldn't go out. I was grounded by being a single parent. So I put together sort of about 200 poems in a kind of cross-reference book, for, poems for broken heart, poems for empty nest syndrome, and just thought through all those different emotions and found poems to match. And then in that process, you get to know the poems really well. In the ambulance, I'd have them all printed as though they were a prescription, ready to give as a gift to somebody after the consultation. So yeah, and I've always on the lookout for more poetry, and I've been editing some poetry anthologies for Macmillan over the last few months. I've done 8 poetry anthologies this year. So you end up bit by bit becoming, I suppose, a kind of expert in the thing that you are
Yeah.
interested in.
You've got to be immersed in it more to learn more about it, and then you're
Yeah,
learning more about poetry as you're reading more
all the
poems.
time. Yeah.
Um, so when you first were driving around the festivals, you weren't thinking then, oh, this is going to be end up becoming a paying job. Well,
No,
so
no.
how were you just doing it because of the love of it and that you wanted to offer poetry to people in a new way?
It was never in any way considered to be something that I make a living from. And now I employ 23 people in our business. So, it's now employing other people. But no, I did it because I wanted to do it. Because I think I remember talking to friends who said one day I'll have a camper van, one day, and I grew up with my dad actually being a perfectionist. One day when we've got some money, we'll paint your bedroom and it'll be beautiful. But we never had that money. So I remember suddenly this kind of light bulb moment of thinking, I'll just paint it myself. I'll do it really badly. I'll do it really cheaply. But I did it. And I've got that kind of ethos that it's better to have a go at doing something, do it badly than not do it at all, and to not to be too worried about it being finished because it never really is.
Yeah.
It's always something you could do better.
So then the transition then from going to the festivals and having the ambulance to having the store in Bishop's Castle. So, you know, did that just come in a dream one night? I'm going to have a store. Like, how did that happen?
I think I'd been driving an ambulance around the whole of the UK and Ireland, and even invited to New Zealand actually. And I didn't take my ambulance, but they gave. So I did it for years, but I had started to get a little bit tired of driving this thing with no power steering, all over the place. And it was hard work. It was really intense being at a festival. You're working outside, you're giving people good attention. It's hours of, it must be what it's like to be a GP in lots of ways. It's very,
Yeah.
you're listening very carefully and giving good attention. Um, and just nearby where I lived, in this tiny town in Shropshire, there was an old ironmonger's, Victorian ironmonger's, for sale. And I remember peering through the dusty windows at the old shop fittings and thinking it looked like an old pharmacy. And a bit like the emergency poet thing, the whole idea came in one kind of, and then I had about 2 years trying to convince my partner that it was a good idea, and my brother saying, why there isn't a poetry pharmacy anywhere in the world? Because no one wants one, he said to me. And I was like, so I've proved him wrong. But
What's
yeah,
interesting to me is a lot of people would think if they were going to open a store like that, which is a little bit quirky and a little bit, you know, questionable,
very.
let's say, then
Yes.
maybe they would do it in a slightly bigger town. I mean, Bishop's Castle is the sleepiest place, We could only find one cafe that was open at 9:30 in the morning. Um,
It's tiny. It hasn't even got a station, has it? But in a sense, in the UK, there are only two other poetry bookshops, and the reason is, the reason my brother said what he said is because you're not going to make poetry doesn't sell. It's a kind of truth universally acknowledged,
yeah,
and it had to be somewhere in the middle of nowhere because we just simply could not have afforded the rents to have an experiment in anywhere that anybody walked past, so it was the reason I was able to sort of take the chance is that we live here, so our mortgage covered the shop. So we didn't have rent to pay, we had the mortgage to pay. So that was part of the risk. And also I've been working in the poetry world for so many years that lots of people knew me,
yeah.
and I knew that our community would be supportive of that, and that people would travel to come and find us for events and so on. But it was largely, no, like, it was very self-indulgent. I made it's like a kind of fever dream, this place, isn't it? Uh, it's kind of, let even the toilets is labeled T.S. Eliot because it's an anagram of toilets, and we've got poems written on the walls in the toilets, and it's just sort of, for me, it's like a poetry sweet shop. It's, let's do the fun things. So yeah, it's slightly self-indulgent.
I think I love that. I love it's a poetry sweet shop because that's what I felt. And as a kid, you can spend hours in a sweet shop just being and looking, and you're going to pick something, but you don't quite know what it is, and you don't want that rush. So I love that you called it a poetry sweet shop, because that's how I felt in there. I love the red cable that goes across the stairs, like you would do on a red carpet. I thought that was great to go up to the consulting room. All little things. The garden out the back was fabulous. Um, I think that what's interesting, though, is that it is self-indulgent and that you are willing to indulge yourself. And
Yeah.
I wonder how many more creative, incredible things could happen in the world if people were willing to indulge themselves.
It's hard though, isn't it? Because I indulge myself with no money, literally no money, and low income. So I would say that, because lots of people are self-indulgent into, and they think that it might involve money, but it doesn't have to at all. I think you just need to start taking those steps towards that self. I mean, it was self-indulgent, but it was also part of community. I was doing things with my friends. I was volunteering myself and my time for the festival. So it was both self-indulgent and generous at the same time, and that's a wonderful thing if you can make that happen.
if you can, and I think self-indulgent, the word itself gets a bad rap because,
Yes, it does.
it's so few people know how to indulge the self in inverted commas, and there's so much kind of people think altruistic martyrdom going on in the world, but really to indulge in oneself sometimes means going to bed early, having a bath, saying no to someone when you don't want to go somewhere. So,
Yeah.
people could break down what how would it be if we indulged ourselves more in all of the parts of our life, including what our dreams might be.
That playful part actually as well.
Exactly, the joyful,
Yeah.
playful part. What if it doesn't matter if you were to win or lose or fail or not fail,
Yeah, it
you
doesn't
could just
matter.
have fun doing something that would indulge you creatively.
Yeah.
Um, what I like, or what I relate to about what you're sharing is that you'd been doing this for a while. You've been around poetry for a long time. And it sort of, people ask me about my business and how it all sort of came to happen. Well, I still had a job in LA that was paying my bills, but I was in classes with my writing teacher for, almost 20 years. So I was always, in writing, and I was in this sort of coaching psychological world for 30 years. So when I talked to my writing teacher and said, I want to teach writing from a coaching perspective, and he said, it'll never work, I did allow him to pause that for me for 6 months, but the
Yeah.
dream was still there.
Yeah.
And so, well, he didn't say it won't work. I think he said pick one, as only he could.
Yes.
I think he
Yeah.
said pick one. And I didn't want to, because what I was hearing was combine these two things that you love. So when people ask, well, how come your business has been so successful? I think it's just because I combined things that I loved. And what I'm hearing from you is that you did a similar thing. You combined things that you'd been doing already that were part of who you were, part of yourself that you loved, and you were like, well, let's just try it and see what happens.
Yeah.
So
I would
maybe the
also
invitation,
say,
no, go on, honey, go on.
sorry, I was just thinking about all of the, like, I've got to a certain age, but all of the things that I have done in my life have informed this place, and that includes being a dinner lady in a primary school. I was a dinner lady, so it meant that I had a health and safety certificate or whatever it is for opening the coffee shop, and I worked on the till in Tesco's, and that I can cope with the till, and this is so even the jobs that look like they weren't bringing me to this point have all fed into that. So
I love that.
it's kind of like nothing is wasted in your experience somehow.
And
Can
then
make
how
it
to
work.
bring it all together. If you
Yeah.
how could you indulge yourself enough to even look at it and bring it all together? I love the fact that indulge has become the word of the day, it seems. Um, how did Kelly Clarkson hear about you?
Well, again, I think we've had loads of publicity. Even the day we opened here 6 years ago, we were on BBC Breakfast Show, and it's poetry, which is not often theatrical, is it? I
Yeah,
think so.
yeah.
We're very visual. I think Kelly Clarkson, we were featured in when we opened in Oxford Street. It went viral on social media. I think Time Out, London, and Visit London, and there were some other things. And then somebody from NBC News did a video about it as well, and people just hear about it, and it's social media, I think,
Yeah.
was how that one came about.
So I know that you now have millions of pills all over the place. I have to ask, who is rolling up those poems and stuffing them in the little pill
It's
capsules?
small children in our cellar that we keep. We It's really funny. This is a really nice thing as well, actually. We do. I don't know if you've heard the term piecework. So we pay people per bottle in this tiny little town of Bishop's Castle. I think there are about 40 people that regularly take them home and make them at home, and then we pay them per bottle. It's a good rate as well, and it's also means that I think this is quite nice because quite a lot of them are single parents who mean that
Yeah.
they can stay at home and work in the evenings, or alongside their children, and or sit and watch television and make them. So that's how we do it.
And so I think I remember when I was in the store, somebody said that you had people that were selling them in stores in other countries now. Is that right? So
Yeah,
is that
we start.
franchising? Is like is that what's happening?
No, we're talking. Some people, lots of people actually have been in touch about having a franchise, and that's complicated because there's a lot of work on our part, about maintaining what it is, and it's kind of its ethos, I suppose. But we've got a few stockists internationally now. I think it's a bookshop in Singapore, one in, I think, Sydney, about to open. Smith and Son in Paris sell them. So we're starting to supply them to
So you'll
bookshops. And then,
sell the bottles then with the pills
yeah,
already in.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Wow, you're going to end up hiring a whole bunch more people in Small Bishop's Castle, I think. It's a community business.
Yeah,
But for
it is.
people who don't know, but this is what we're talking about. So these are the little bottles. So that one is a joy one. And these little capsules inside have little poems in them. I got this one, the smaller one, which is love. And then I got the social media detox. I haven't started on that one just yet. And then I'll just show people for the sake of it. So you pull the capsule out and then you open it up, and then inside here, this is what people in the town do. And then they put, and the inside here is a poem. I'm not reading it now.
What poem have you got?
I was going to say,
I'm
I'm not
interested
reading it now.
in
I'm keeping private about it, but now you've asked me.
it.
I've got to read it. It's by Sarah Lindsay.
Is that
Small,
from Joy?
that is
Or-
from, yes. See, look, don't you? Look at you, you're so clever. Okay, it's Small Moth. She spots it, camouflaged, a glimmer, and then full on happiness, plashing blunt, soft wings inside her, as if it wants to escape again. It's like I think oh, where's my capsule? There it is. I think Maria and I both cried like 3 or 4 times in the store. And then when we went and had a coffee, we were like, okay, we've got to regroup a little bit. So we went and had a coffee. I bought one of those boil brew things, which I absolutely love for making my tea. So that was very cool to come away with that. And I said to her, okay, look down the list of the focus topics that are on the wall and pick the one that really resonates mostly for you. And let's focus our attention on the books in those sections. So we both said quiet. And then I looked at her and I said, but you do have a quiet energy about you. I don't think it's quiet. So she paused and then she went straight down to the end. What's the one about wild nature?
Wild Remedy.
Wild
Wild Remedy.
remedy. She said it hit her in her heart.
Oh,
It hit her in her heart. And so she stayed focused there and she bought her books from the wild remedy section. I stayed focused in the calm section and bought my books from there. And it's like the books were the right books. The bottles were the right bottles, the books were the
that's.
right books.
I mean, that we want people to shop, because it's not just poetry in those sections. It's
Yeah.
philosophy, psychology,
Yeah.
and all sorts of non-fiction. But we want people to shop intuitively, so that the book that you have has a relationship to the one that's next to it, not just A to Z. So that's a joy to do as well. It was a kind of self-indulgence as well, to curate the titles in our bookshops. That's
But that
been.
works though, because it wouldn't have perhaps worked quite the same way if we hadn't felt drawn to the blueberry cake. So we were like, let's have some cake and indulge ourselves that way. And then let's just sit quietly here because we could have come home with so many books otherwise. But up until that point, we had been moving around and picking up books from here and looking at books from there. We weren't really narrowing down our focus. But
Mhm.
once we
Good
narrowed
idea.
down our focus, the choice of what books we wanted to come home with was so much easier.
Yeah.
And we've continued that conversation, she and I. So So now, obviously, congratulations. Yes, you've opened in Lush on Oxford Street. That's just amazing. And do you sit back and question, like, well, how did this happen? And feel like you want to pinch yourself still?
Um, yeah, yes. I mean, it's mainly that last year. I'm not sure if on paper it looks successful. You know, it has succeeded in lots of ways. Last year, I'm not sure that I enjoyed it though. You know, so it was a lot of work and a lot of learning and a lot of, you know, employing people, managing people, and that's not necessarily the thing that I wanted to do. You know, it's running ahead, which is great, and I'm very curious to see where it might go, which is my biggest motivation for, you know, for watching it roll on. And that kind of what's the word, you know, that kind of zealous desire to get poetry to people who don't normally read it. That's my kind of underpinning of everything, really, you know, to show people that they will like something. um but yeah, I do have to pinch myself. I'm less in the bookshop and more on my computer, you know, which is lovely as well. But yeah, that what we're doing, that we're probably going to be inside a Lush in Liverpool later this year, and we're going to Bath tomorrow to look at a shop of our own to rent in Bath. So those projects are fun, you know, to set up another space, which will be fun. But yeah, so I don't know. It is very weird. It's all a bit unbelievable.
Are you doing consultancy still? And will that stop eventually, do you think?
I don't do much now. I've what I did a couple of years ago is we had some four local librarians came and did training to be poetry pharmacists, and one of those people also works with us here. So Becky does most of the consultations now. In London, we don't have the space there to do it. We do them online. So I don't do very many anymore. In our shops, more so in London probably than you experienced here. We write little mini prescriptions when there's time, and if people come to buy their pills, and you know, someone will have a tiny little consultation there with the poetry staff. They're all poets actually, in Oxford Street, which is nice.
I think that
But
was that was
I
something else.
don't have as much time to,
That was something else that impacted us was the gals in the store. Like they felt an extension. I think Jane, was it someone called Jane?
yeah.
Jane was lovely. And then there was another gal, I forget her name now, a younger gal. But they were super helpful in explaining kind of how to get the most out of the experience, because it's not just a bookstore, it's an experience. How to get the most out of the experience and how to sort of be with all the content that you have. Um, and they felt very much in keeping with the flavor of what you've
Yeah.
created.
Yeah, that's really important. All the staff that work in either shop are, I mean, they're very well qualified for the job that they do. But the most important quality they have is that they're kind, and you know, will be just welcoming and kind to people. And in Bishop's Castle, most of the people in Bishop's Castle are like that. It's a small community and it's very friendly, but we've managed to replicate that in Oxford Street as well. And I think I'm really proud of that everyone there will give people time and listen to them, which is unusual in Oxford Street, really. Very unusual.
So, in sort of coming to a close then, because I don't want this to go on too long, so I want people to watch the whole thing if they can. If you were sitting at home and you were, you had some kind of a creative idea, regardless of how old you are, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, what would you say to somebody who feels all well, I can't because I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't have the experience, the knowledge, you know, I already don't think it's going to be what I want it to be, and I'm not willing to see what it might be. What would you say? Here's a prescription to the universe here. What would your prescription to the universal nature of human be? Before.
You probably know what I'm going to say, Jules. I just start taking the one little step towards it. Just do that one step, and then the next step, and then the next step, and you'll find that you're doing it. And I think one of the things for me is that I don't know if it's true of other people, but I have a real kind of awareness of how finite life is. And when I was in dementia care homes, there seemed to be people, at the end of their life who were either people were full of regret for the things that they wished they had done, or people who were really contented with that they had tried that and they had tried that they did that, and everything that seems to go wrong is something really useful. It's a learning moment, isn't it? And it's something that maybe you won't do again, but it's if you can embrace that as well, because it's useful.
So
That's a
embrace.
quite long-winded, wasn't it?
No, embrace what might go wrong because you're going to learn from it and take that first step, which
Yeah.
reminds me of Start Close In, David White's poem. So you guys should also go and read Start Close In by David White because it talks about that first step, the step you're afraid to take, the step that's yours, nobody else's. And so, Deb, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
spending this time with me and with my community and whoever else that gets to see this video. And thank you for being such a brave warrior of the human spirit that you've been, um, because it's already impacted me and my family. And so
Oh,
thank you for that.
that's lovely, Jules. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.